Hey everyone, I am reading Black Cat Security by Katerina, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. There's a curse on you, her voice startled Dragomir out of his grim reverie. At this very moment, he'd been deciding between getting hopelessly drunk or moderately drunk. He liked the first option better, but his finances weren't exactly blooming. Yeah, thanks, I know, he muttered in shock, suppressing a vicious desire to snap and say something rude. Of course he fucking knew. The girl lingered beside him by the bar counter, a petite brunette with a gaze surprisingly sharp for such a nice face. High heels but no makeup, casually dressed, certainly not for picking up strangers in a bar. More like for relaxing with friends on a Friday evening. Normally, she would be a type to interest him, but he was far from normal now. He wished she would go away already, turned off by his surely indifferent countenance. "Is it easier for you to speak Latin?" she asked instead, tilting her head curiously. Yes, his Czech wasn't ideal, and it became clear, just from a single short phrase. Those who said all Slavic languages sounded the same should have tried learning them instead of simply listening. But nothing indicated he knew Latin at all. It was international, but mostly for scholars and well-educated people. He didn't look like one of them, and he knew it perfectly well, nor did anything in his appearance betray his former occupation. He seemed more of a rough and rowdy biker type, clad in an old leather jacket, jeans, and heavy, thick-soled boots. "How do you know?" he asked, curious, though he hadn't been in the mood for a nice, friendly chat. He rarely was nowadays. "It's a complex curse, very intricate, very skillfully done," she said, like she'd marveled at it. "You must have been an important person for someone to put the spell on you. Also, I see there have been attempts to remove it, unsuccessful, but insistent. Only very strong mages would even try to do it, and only in a joint effort. Why would they care? My guess is you were one of them. Not anymore." He emptied the contents of his glass in one large gulp. Ugh, nasty stuff. "Are you a witch or a mage?" he asked, and waved the bartender to get a refill. He wondered how other magicians saw his curse, invisible for common people, as the sigil burnt into the flesh of his shoulder where the wicked hand had touched him. Was it all the more ugly, scarred and disfigured because of the messy endeavors to get rid of it? He decided he didn't really want to know. "Just a witch. Nothing high class," the girl said with a small smile, as she watched the bartender pouring more Silvervoix into Dragomir's glass. "A bit of fortune-telling, a bit of herbal potion-making, a bit of coaching. I keep a small family business. Want to see my license?" she suggested almost playfully. "Nope," Dragomir said briskly, and took another sip from his glass. Unlike her, he'd been a magician, having finished the famous Scholomance school in the Carpathians. Also, unlike her, he had no license at the moment and didn't intend to apply for one. "Does alcohol reduce the effect of the curse to some degree?" she asked, not threateningly this time, but with what seemed like genuine sympathy. "Nope. More importantly, alcohol reduced him to nothingness. Numbed him, but not enough. Not yet." He already regretted starting a conversation, annoyance building up slowly but steadily. Why would she ask? Why would she care? "I'm Ida, by the way," the witch said, as if she had noticed his obvious displeasure. Or maybe she didn't want to notice. Stupid, stupid girl. Mild irritation was starting to evolve into anger, both at her for being so amiably intrusive and at himself for wishing it could lead to something. He willed himself not to look at her, not to answer. It would only be worse. It would end up badly, just like it had the last time. He hadn't been with a woman for quite a while, and it took him all his resolve to feign indifference. "Nobody will be able to take off your curse except for the one who made it," she said, as if he wasn't well aware of it. But then she added, "Maybe I could be of some help, though." Sure, a witch from a seedy bar for tourists and local drunkards would do more than a bunch of highly skilled magicians from the Scholomance school. He would laugh her in the face if he felt like facing her now. "When you'll be in the mood, call me," she said, and slipped a business card along the counter towards him until it stopped at his glass. A simple white rectangle with her name and address, and a small silhouette of a black cat on top. After that, thank God for small mercies, she left. He didn't watch her go, but in a few moments he heard the squeaky front door opening and closing. He crumpled her business card in his fist, crushed it like a fucked-up origami, and tossed it to the floor. Having emptied his glass, he caught his grumpy reflection in the large mirror behind the liquor bottles, and automatically reached to smooth his hair. He trimmed it short, out of an old habit, but when it grew just a little, it always stood up in wild spikes, and he didn't like it. He didn't like almost anything of late. Behind his back, 3 men marched to the door. He wouldn't have paid attention to them if he hadn't caught a glimpse of a familiar tattoo in the mirror. One of the guys had studded mallet smashing through a pentagram tattoo on his forearm. Malleus Maleficarum, the hammer of witches. It didn't look good. Not for the girl who had just left. Witch bashers. That was who they were. It had been long since women were allowed to practice magic freely and enter magic schools along with them. It had been even longer since magicians of whatever gender had acquired any problems with state or church authorities for what they did, having settled a mutually satisfying deal centuries ago. But there were always some douchebags who had their own thoughts on the matter, always eager to see evil outside of themselves. For a moment Dragomir wavered. Maybe they weren't after her. Maybe she was long gone. But then he bounced off his bar stool and took after them. He'd had a shitty day. He'd had a shitty week, and an equally shitty month. He could temporarily forget about it by getting drunk again, or he could do something else just as foolish. For a change. It was springtime. Wherever there was a public garden, Prague smelled heavily of bird cherries and apple blossoms, a perfect time to walk under the streetlights with a beloved hand in hand, and to whisper someone else's poetry into the pungent air, if you were romantic, of course. Dragomir certainly wasn't. He almost missed the 3 men disappearing into a small side street and walked faster to catch up. "Don't be shy, little witch," he heard as he turned around the corner. "Why not have some fun with us?" A blank wall to one side, dirty yellow in the light of a distant lantern, dark windows of some historical building to the other. The narrow alley was an ideal place for an assault, classic almost. The girl and the 3 men blocking her way looked like figures in a picture illustrating the dangers of walking alone at night. "Hey guys," Dragomir said most pleasantly, "I think your tensions are unwanted." It was reckless to announce his presence right away, but he didn't care. It was better than entering a boxing ring to spar, for no rules would apply here, and it was fine. Energy rose within him, ready to boil over to the top, an eagerness to hurt, to draw blood, to crush bones. He could let it loose without any remorse. Finally, an indulgence, a treat. Predictably, he received an inelegant string of cussing in response. His check really wasn't good, but the general idea was clear enough. He was offered to fuck off and go on his way. No, I don't think so, he thought. 2 men moved towards him, intimidating but uncoordinated, while the 3rd one still blocked Ida's way. Dragomir didn't wait for the witch bashers to decide what they wanted to do about him. He wasn't here to avoid trouble or talk them out of it. The first rule of a dirty street brawl, if you're going to fight at all, hit first and hit hard. He launched forward and landed a brutal punch to the closest target's throat, making him gag for breath. A start back in a deceptive retreat, and then his heavy boot crushed the 2nd man's kneecap. A howl. This one was out, down on the ground. The advantage of surprise was lost on the 3rd guy, and Dragomir missed a few blows, but didn't even register the pain as he pummeled his adversary, making him stagger back and go into defensive mode. "Behind you!" Ida's cry was a bit too late. The first fighter had recovered surprisingly fast and tried to grab him by the elbows. Dragomir stomped on his foot viciously and headbutted him backwards. Something crunched and it got him free, but he failed to block a nasty jab to his solar plexus from the man in front of him. Pain exploded there. He missed one more punch, struggling to breathe, and it made him do what he didn't intend to, what he'd sworn not to do. Out of pure survival instinct, he put all the rage that wanted to be unbound to a single hit, and it knocked his enemy off like a blast, literally, and sent him flying against the nearest wall. He crashed hard against it and slumped to the ground like a broken doll. It was over fast, like a car wreck. All 3 men were down now, dealt with. The uncontrolled surge of energy concussed Dragomir as well, but not too badly. Staggering on his feet, drained, emptied, he told himself it had been a dirty fight anyway. How much dirty was too much? He turned to Ida, wiping blood from a split eyebrow. The girl just stood there at all time, watching them. "Why the fuck didn't you run?" he growled at her, his voice menacingly glottal. He knew he looked terrible. He knew he sounded even worse. "It was interesting to watch you," she said, surprisingly calm. "Besides, I wanted to thank you afterwards. By the way, Prague isn't usually dangerous. Don't get the wrong impression. These are random scum." She waved dismissively at the 3 beaten-up thugs. One of them was unconscious, and the other 2 were writhing on the cobblestone in different stages of agony, temporarily rendered unfit for combat. They had been lucky Dragomir didn't have a switchblade on him, but not too lucky. He could kick them now, as long as he liked, break more bones, make them cry and beg. He wanted to. "I wonder why you didn't use a spell or 2 right from the start," Ida continued, snapping him back from a bloodthirsty dream. "You obviously could, but chose not to until it was unavoidable. I'm intrigued." She talked to him like he wasn't a danger himself, like they could continue chatting, and maybe walk away together, her arm slung around his. She was so close. She smelled of roses and leather. "Don't go near me," he said huskily. He felt like a cannon that had just fired, all grimy and burnt out inside, but ready for another shot, for someone else to destroy. He took a step back, then another, and then he turned and walked away fast like the coward he was. But being a coward sometimes wasn't the worst option. That night, he lay awake on his rickety cot, dismally sober. The window was open and a draught crept in to the small attic room. A dog-tag pendant with an amulet of Saint Cyprian, the patron of sorcerers, felt cool on Dragomir's skin. Wearing it now, a bitter reminder of what he had been once, was utterly ridiculous, but he wore it still. Naked over the crumpled, slightly stale sheets, he touched himself, slid a hand down the trail of hair on his chest and abdomen. He needed a distraction. What distraction could he have if not alcohol? He palmed his cock, coaxing it to stiffness. Maybe the little witch wouldn't have been against it, if he'd taken her right there and then as his victory prize. She had flirted with him. She had continued to flirt after she had watched him beating the 3 men in front of her. She had seen him sinking into the frenzy of fighting and liked it. So, if he stayed, he would cross the distance between them in one rapid lurch and pin her against a wall. Roughly, she would gasp, half in surprise, half in terror. His cock twitched and hardened, and he stroked himself, his eyes closed. Oh yes, she would be frightened now, like she should have been. He would grind his hips against her, so she would feel his erection, a bulge still trapped in his jeans. She would tremble, pressed to the wall, unable to break free, knowing he'd take her and nothing could stop him. Certainly not her hitching whisper. Don't, please." His grin would certainly scare her even more. He wouldn't be in the mood for talking or for the gentleness either. His pace picked up. Each time his hand ran up the length of his cock, he thumbed the head before sliding back down, smearing pre-cum generously along the shaft. He would squeeze her ass with a feral groan, eager to get into her jeans. Oh wait, it was a fantasy, so she could wear anything he wanted. A skirt, then. He would rummage his way under it and yank her panties down. "Please stop it," she would beg. Like hell he would. She had been teasing him, luring him. His hand over her mouth. "Shut up, witch." A stifled scream into his palm as he, no. No, no, no. He didn't want it like this. He didn't. He couldn't. Oh, hell. Dragomir slammed his fist into the wall, hard, and did it 3 times more and breathed through the pain and anger and self-loathing that filled him. Muffled shouting came from the apartment next to his, an elaborate framework of curses around a justified question why the heck someone would bang nails into a wall this late. Dragomir passed his bloodied knuckles to his mouth and laughed unhappily. Why, indeed, his erection had wilted, and a damp sheen on his body felt unpleasantly cold. How could he have turned into a man who'd want such a thing? Nothing better than the witch bashers he'd fought tonight. It was unfair. All of this was so much unfair. He never had nightmares about what had happened to him, but he often played it all out in his head when he was awake. The same scene, the same words, over and over on repeat. Thank you.